The door of his mansion opens and he freezes. Before him stands the woman he paid to forget. But it's not her presence that leaves him breathless. It's the three small figures by her side, 3 6-year-old children, holding hands with her. The autumn sun cast a golden light through the enormous windows of Anthony Reynolds' penthouse in Manhattan. As CEO of Reynolds Enterprises, one of the largest real estate corporations in the United States, his Fifth Avenue apartment, valued at $15 million, stood as a monument to his success. Italian marble floors, contemporary art pieces, and a panoramic view of Central Park formed part of his unofficial business card. Lexi Martins, 24, daughter of Brazilian immigrants who grew up in the Bronx, stared fixedly at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands inside the marble bathroom. 2 bright pink lines confirmed what her body had begun signaling in recent weeks. The young woman bit her lip, feeling a mixture of fear and hope. She had been working as an executive assistant at Reynolds Enterprises for just over a year when Anthony, 15 years her senior, began noticing her extraordinary efficiency and sharp intelligence. The affair had started 6 months ago. Late dinners at the office, text messages that extended into the early hours, and eventually secret meetings in this very apartment. Anthony had always made it clear that their relationship needed to remain discreet. "Corporate image issues," he casually explained while caressing her hair. Lexi, in love and dreamy, imagined that eventually the secrecy would no longer be necessary. Taking a deep breath, she left the bathroom and found Anthony in the spacious living room working on his laptop. "Anthony, we need to talk," said Lexi, her voice almost inaudible. He looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "I'm in the middle of a crucial negotiation. Can it wait?" "No, it can't." She extended the pregnancy test toward him. Anthony fixed his gaze on the small plastic object. His face, normally controlled and charming, transformed into a mask of contained fury. "Is this some kind of joke?" "I'm 10 weeks pregnant," Lexi replied, trying to maintain her composure. "I wanted us to talk about our plans, about us." The silence that followed was deafening. Anthony closed his laptop with a decisive click and stood up. "There is no us, Lexi, there never was." His voice was icy. "You're an employee I had fun with, nothing more." The words hit Lexi like a slap. "But we've spent months together. You said you cared about me." Anthony laughed, a dry, cruel sound. "Let's be realistic. You're a girl from the Bronx, daughter of immigrants, no connections, no elite education. What could you possibly offer to my life beyond temporary distraction? You're certainly not material to be someone's wife in my position." She felt the blood drain from her face. "This is about social status? I thought you saw beyond that." "Be practical," he continued, walking to the bar to pour himself a whiskey. "I'm about to announce my candidacy for the Senate next year. I have a planned engagement to Senator Mitchell's daughter. My life is mapped out and you," he gestured toward her, "are not part of it." The following day, Lexi was called to the legal department of Reynolds Enterprises. Edwin Hartman, the corporation's chief lawyer, waited with a folder of documents and an envelope. "Miss Martins, Mr. Reynolds would like to resolve this situation efficiently." Hartman pushed the documents toward her. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. By signing it, you agree never to discuss your relationship with Mr. Reynolds, never contact him again, and deal with your current medical condition." "Medical condition?" repeated Lexi, stunned. "The pregnancy," clarified the lawyer emotionlessly. "Mr. Reynolds strongly recommends that you use the resources provided to terminate the pregnancy. However, should you decide to proceed, the agreement still applies. The child must never know the father's identity, and you must never seek child support or any form of recognition." He pushed the envelope toward her. "In exchange for your signature and silence, Mr. Reynolds offers $1 million. Consider it a fresh start, away from New York, preferably." Lexi opened the envelope with numb fingers. A check for $1 million, signed by Anthony Reynolds, seemed to mock her. And if I refuse? The lawyer smiled coldly. Then we'll face a legal battle where your reputation, personal history, and private life will be publicly scrutinized. Mr. Reynolds has unlimited resources to ensure you're portrayed as an opportunist trying to extort a prominent man. Furthermore, I can guarantee you'll never work at any prestigious company in this city again. 2 hours later, Lexi was cleaning out her locker at the company, escorted by security guards as if she were a criminal. The signed agreement weighed in her purse alongside the check. The official explanation was that she had been fired for inappropriate conduct in the workplace. In her tiny Queens apartment, shared with 2 roommates, Lexi cried herself to sleep. The next morning, she made a decision that would change her life. She wouldn't have the abortion, not because of religious or moral principles, but because that child was the only thing truly hers. Anthony had stolen her dignity, her job, and her confidence, but he wouldn't take this from her. In the following weeks, Lexi faced the reality of being an unemployed pregnant woman in New York. No company in the corporate sector returned her calls. Apparently, Hartman had fulfilled his promise to tarnish her professionally. She managed to get 3 part-time jobs: receptionist at a clinic in the morning, supermarket cashier in the afternoon, and remote data entry operator at night. Anthony's money remained untouched in a savings account. "I won't use a cent of this money for myself," she promised herself. "It will be the educational fund for my child." The surprise came during her first ultrasound. "Congratulations, Miss Martins. I'm seeing 3 well-defined gestational sacs. You're expecting triplets." Lexi's world, which had already collapsed, now seemed to spin at a dizzying speed. Triplets. 3 babies to raise alone. 3 mouths to feed. 3 futures to build. That night, sitting on the last bus returning home after 16 hours of work, Lexi made a promise to her unborn children and to herself. "Anthony Reynolds believes I'm worth nothing, that I'm not capable of anything beyond being his temporary entertainment. He's wrong. One day I'll return so powerful that he'll have to swallow every cruel word he said. Not for revenge, but because it's the truth he refuses to see. And you, my children, will never, ever know the feeling of not being enough." In the weeks that followed, Lexi fought against the constant nausea and exhaustion that seemed to grow exponentially with 3 babies developing inside her. The clinic job was manageable. Dr. Patel, the owner, was sympathetic to her situation and allowed her frequent breaks. The supermarket was another story. "Martins, customers are complaining," her supervisor said, pointing to her growing belly. "We can't keep you on the floor looking like that." That evening, she called her mother, Maria, swallowing her pride. "Mom, I need to come home." The tiny Bronx apartment welcomed her back. Maria, who had spent 20 years cleaning Manhattan penthouses not unlike Anthony's, cleared a corner of the living room for the future babies. "It's not much, but it's ours," she said, hugging her daughter. At the bank, Lexi opened an account labeled Reynolds Educational Fund and deposited the untouched check. "This money isn't mine," she told the confused bank manager. "It belongs to my children's future." While her body grew heavier, Lexi's determination strengthened. At the public library, surrounded by books on business schools, night courses, and scholarships, she plotted her resurrection. "I need to build a future for my children," she told the social worker assigned to her case. "I don't want to depend on government assistance forever." The night classes at the community college were exhausting. Lexi's enormous belly made sitting at the small desks uncomfortable, and she was the only pregnant woman among young students. But she took meticulous notes, asked insightful questions, and scored at the top of every test. When labor came prematurely, Maria was her only support in the delivery room. Unlike the other women with husbands and extended families, Lexi gripped her mother's hand as she brought 3 tiny lives into the world: Sophia, Lucas, and Mateus Martins. In the neonatal ICU, Lexi stood paralyzed with emotion before the 3 incubators. Each tiny baby, connected to monitors and tubes, displayed the unmistakable green-blue eyes identical to Anthony's, a Reynolds family trait that would forever mark them as his, whether he acknowledged them or not. At home, the challenge became monumental. Lexi nursed 2 babies simultaneously while studying for exams, dark circles permanently marking her face. "You will never know what it feels like to be inadequate," she whispered to her 1-month-old triplets as they slept. Between feedings and diaper changes, she organized resumes and submitted online applications, determined to find better employment. Maria arrived home exhausted from cleaning wealthy homes, immediately taking over the babies so Lexi could attend her classes. That Christmas was sparse, just a small tree and homemade presents, a stark contrast to the opulence of her previous life. As Maria sang Brazilian lullabies to the babies, Lexi scrolled through her phone and froze at a news headline, "Reynolds Enterprises heir announces engagement to Senator Mitchell's daughter." The accompanying photo showed Anthony and Catherine at a glamorous charity gala, her diamond ring prominently displayed. "He moved on as if we never existed," Lexi whispered, looking at her sleeping children. As she struggled to get her triplets to sleep that night, Lexi couldn't imagine that one day she would be the one making business headlines while the Reynolds empire began its slow but inexorable fall. The image of Anthony and Catherine's engagement announcement haunted Lexi's dreams that night. She woke at 3 in the morning, her body aching from the constant demands of caring for 3 infants simultaneously. The small apartment in the Bronx felt suffocating in the pre-dawn hours, with the radiator hissing and clanking in the corner. Mateus began to cry first, his tiny lungs remarkably powerful. Before his wails could wake his siblings, Lexi lifted him gently from the modified dresser drawer that served as his crib. Her body, still recovering from the C-section that had brought 3 lives into the world 2 months earlier, protested with every movement. "Shh, meu amor," she whispered, the Portuguese phrase her mother used feeling natural on her tongue. "Mama's here." The pregnancy had transformed her body rapidly. Where she once wore tailored dresses at Reynolds Enterprises, she now lived in oversized t-shirts and elastic waist pants, the uniform of exhausted new motherhood. Her formerly flat stomach now bore the silver-white stretch marks of carrying triplets, badges of survival she wore without shame. Winter turned into spring, and spring into an unforgiving New York summer. Lexi pushed a second-hand triple stroller through sweltering streets to the small supermarket where she had managed to secure a cashier position. "I'm sorry, Martins, but customers have been complaining," Mr. Goldstein said, his eyes deliberately avoiding her face. He gestured vaguely toward her midsection, though her postpartum body was now merely soft rather than pregnant. "The owner thinks it's better if you... well, we need someone who can stand for longer shifts without breaks to pump milk." She nodded numbly, collecting her final paycheck. The amount seemed pitiful against the mountain of expenses 3 babies created. That night, she made the call she'd been avoiding. "Mama," she said when her mother answered, her voice finally breaking, "I need to come home. I can't do this alone anymore." 2 days later, Lexi found herself back in her childhood bedroom in her mother's small Bronx apartment. Maria Martins, 52 years old with hands roughened by decades of cleaning wealthy people's homes, welcomed her daughter and 3 grandchildren with open arms and no judgment. "It's not much," Maria said, showing Lexi how she'd cleared the small living room corner, arranging 3 second-hand bassinets in a neat row. "But it's ours. We'll make it work, Filha." The following week, Lexi sat across from a bank manager, the check from Anthony still uncashed. She'd carried it through her pregnancy, through labor, through countless sleepless nights, refusing to touch what she considered tainted money. "I want to open a trust fund," she explained to the confused young banker. "The Reynolds Educational Fund. This money isn't for me, it's for my children's future education." "All of it?" the banker asked incredulously, looking at the 7-figure sum. "Every penny," Lexi confirmed. This money was meant to make me and my children disappear. Instead, it will give them every opportunity their father tried to deny them. Between feedings and diaper changes, Lexi haunted the public library, researching schools, night courses, and scholarship opportunities. The triplets, bundled in their stroller, became a familiar sight to the librarians who cooed over them while Lexi pored over brochures for community colleges. "I need to build a future for my children," she told the social worker assigned to her case, a tired-looking woman named Janet who had initially suggested government assistance programs. "I don't want to depend on benefits forever. I want to show my kids that circumstances don't define you." Janet had smiled for the first time since they'd met. Most single mothers of triplets would just be focused on surviving the day. You're already planning years ahead. "Survival isn't enough," Lexi had answered. "They deserve more than that." Night classes at Bronx Community College became her lifeline. Her enormous diaper bag became a makeshift book bag, textbooks wedged between bottles and burp cloths. The classroom desks were uncomfortable for her postpartum body, and she was invariably the only parent among young students fresh from high school, but her determination never wavered. "Martins," her economics professor noted after she'd aced another test, "you have a remarkable aptitude for business concepts. Have you considered specializing in this direction?" She had nodded, already seeing possibilities beyond what her current circumstances suggested. When the triplets were 6 months old, Lexi felt the first contraction while sitting in her statistics class. Rushing to the hospital with her mother, she realized she had no one else to call. The memory of Anthony's cruel dismissal, "You're certainly not material to be someone's wife in my position," echoed in her mind as contractions intensified. The delivery room was a stark contrast to the maternity wards portrayed in movies. Instead of a nervous husband holding her hand, there was only Maria, murmuring prayers in Portuguese as Lexi brought 3 tiny lives into the world. Sophia arrived first, a determined cry announcing her entrance. Lucas followed 7 minutes later, smaller, but with lungs just as powerful. Mateus, the smallest at just under 5 pounds, arrived last, silent until the doctor gently stimulated his tiny chest. In the neonatal intensive care unit, Lexi stood before 3 incubators, overwhelmed by love and fear in equal measure. Each baby, connected to monitors and feeding tubes, bore Anthony's unmistakable green-blue eyes, the distinctive Reynolds family trait that generations had carried. "They're fighters, like their mother," the NICU nurse said kindly, noting how Lexi had been there from dawn until the enforced departure at night, pumping milk every 3 hours despite her exhaustion. At home, life became an endless cycle of feeding, changing, and brief moments of sleep. Lexi learned to nurse 2 babies simultaneously while studying for exams, dark circles permanently etched beneath her eyes. Maria would arrive home from cleaning penthouses on Park Avenue, her back aching, and immediately take over baby duty so Lexi could attend evening classes. "You will never know what it feels like to be inadequate," Lexi whispered to her 1-month-old triplets as they slept, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchronization. "You will never doubt your worth the way I was made to doubt mine." Between feedings and the mountains of laundry 3 babies generated, she organized resumes and submitted online applications. The search for better employment was disheartening. Her former position at Reynolds Enterprises acted not as an asset but as a mysterious black mark. Phone calls went unreturned. Promising interviews suddenly canceled. The Christmas season brought a dusting of snow to the Bronx and a stark reminder of how different her life had become. The previous year, she'd attended the Reynolds Enterprises holiday gala in a designer dress, Anthony's hand possessively at the small of her back. This year, their celebration consisted of a small artificial tree and homemade ornaments crafted during precious moments when all 3 babies napped simultaneously. Maria sang Brazilian lullabies to the babies while Lexi wrapped simple gifts in newspaper comics. Taking a rare moment to check her phone, she froze at a news headline. Reynolds Enterprises heir announces engagement to Senator Mitchell's daughter. The accompanying photo showed Anthony and Catherine at a charity gala, her massive diamond engagement ring prominently displayed. He looked exactly as Lexi remembered, confident, polished, entitled. His arm wrapped possessively around Catherine's waist, much as it had once encircled hers. He moved on as if we never existed, Lexi whispered, looking at her sleeping children, each bearing his unmistakable eyes. As she struggled to get her triplets to sleep that night, Lexi couldn't imagine that one day she would be the one making business headlines, while the Reynolds empire began its slow but inexorable fall. The headlines announcing Anthony's engagement faded from the news cycle, but the pain lingered in Lexi's heart. 3 years passed in a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and relentless determination. Now, standing in front of the community college auditorium in her graduation gown, Lexi felt a surge of pride as she clutched her business administration diploma with honors. "Alexia Martins," the dean called, and Lexi walked across the stage with her head held high. In the audience, her mother Maria struggled to keep the 3-year-old triplets in their seats. Sophia, already showing signs of her mother's determination, clapped enthusiastically. Lucas, quiet and observant, watched the proceedings with unusual focus for a toddler. Mateus, the most sensitive of the three, called out, "Mama!" when he spotted Lexi on stage. After the ceremony, surrounded by fellow graduates taking photos with their families, Lexi hugged her children close. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to them, though they were too young to fully understand. That evening, after the triplets were asleep, Lexi sat at her small kitchen table and opened an envelope that had arrived earlier that week. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the acceptance letter from the University of Chicago, offering her a partial scholarship to their business program. "Even with the partial scholarship, how will I pay the rest and support 3 children?" she murmured, calculating figures in her notebook. Maria sat across from her, wrinkled hands cradling a cup of tea. "Use some of the money from that man," she said simply. "It's for their education, and your education is for them too." The following week, Lexi made the difficult decision to withdraw a portion of the Reynolds Educational Fund for the first time. "It's an investment in their future," she told herself as she signed the paperwork. The goodbye to their Bronx apartment was bittersweet. Lexi stood in the doorway with the triplets, each holding a small backpack with their treasured possessions, while Maria locked the door one final time. "Chicago will give us a fresh start," Lexi said, taking Mateus's small hand in hers while Sophia and Lucas held onto Maria's hands. The contrast between the University of Chicago's imposing Gothic architecture and their cramped apartment in an immigrant neighborhood couldn't have been starker. Lexi had found a 2-bedroom unit they could just afford in a building filled with families who spoke a dozen different languages. On her first day at the community health clinic where she'd secured a position as an administrative assistant, Lexi arrived early. The waiting room was already filling with patients, many clearly from low-income backgrounds. "These files are a disaster," she muttered, discovering years of medical records haphazardly organized. By lunchtime, she had implemented a color-coding system that would make retrieving patient information significantly more efficient. Dr. Harriet Wong, the clinic director, noticed immediately. "You've done more in one morning than the last assistant did in 6 months," she observed. "Where did you learn these organizational skills?" "I was an executive assistant at a major corporation in New York," Lexi replied simply, leaving out the painful details. At home, the triplets were showing signs of exceptional development. That evening, Lexi watched in amazement as Sophia assembled a puzzle designed for children twice her age, her tiny fingers confidently connecting the pieces. "Look, Mama!" she exclaimed when the image of a butterfly emerged complete. Lucas, sitting nearby, was arranging numbered blocks in perfect sequence, while Mateus hummed a complex melody he'd heard on the radio that morning, his pitch perfect. After tucking the children into bed, all three sharing one small bedroom while Lexi and Maria took turns sleeping on the pull-out couch, Lexi stayed up well past midnight studying. The circles under her eyes deepened, but her determination never wavered. One morning at the clinic, Lexi noticed an elderly Mexican woman crying softly in the corner of the waiting room. The receptionist was attempting to communicate with her in English, growing increasingly frustrated. "Puedo ayudarle?" Lexi asked, approaching the woman. Her Spanish was basic, learned from neighbors in the Bronx, but the relief on the woman's face was immediate. Between her limited Spanish and the woman's broken English, Lexi managed to understand that she had been experiencing chest pains but couldn't explain her symptoms to the medical staff. "We need a better system," Lexi told Dr. Wong later. "So many patients here speak different languages and critical information gets lost in translation." It was during this interaction that Lexi first met David Chen. The tall, gentle man with wire-rimmed glasses was waiting for his regular diabetes checkup, observing the exchange with interest. "That was impressive," he said when Lexi returned to the reception desk. Not many people would take the time to bridge that communication gap. Lexi smiled, noticing his kind eyes and the stack of books he carried, advanced mathematics texts. "It's a serious problem here. People are literally dying because they can't communicate their symptoms effectively." David introduced himself as a mathematics professor at the university. Their conversation was brief, but left an impression on Lexi. 2 days later, he returned to the clinic, this time with children's books in English, Spanish, and Mandarin. "I thought these might be useful for the waiting room," he said. "And perhaps your children might enjoy them too. You mentioned they're 3? The first time David visited their apartment, Lexi felt momentary embarrassment at their modest living conditions, but he seemed not to notice the second-hand furniture or the cramped space, focusing instead on the triplets who immediately warmed to his gentle manner. "They're extraordinary, Lexi," he said, watching as Lucas solved a simple math puzzle he'd brought. Sophia was already examining David's smartphone with remarkable dexterity, while Mateus shyly played a simple tune on a toy xylophone. After the children were asleep, Lexi and David sat at the small kitchen table talking well into the night. She found herself sharing her frustrations about the healthcare system. "The problem is access," she explained passionately. "People are dying waiting for basic care, and it's not just about money. It's language barriers, transportation issues, work schedules that don't allow for lengthy clinic visits." David listened intently, then began sketching diagrams on a paper napkin. "What if technology could connect patients and doctors without physical barriers?" he suggested. "A platform that translates in real time, allows for virtual appointments, tracks medication adherence." Lexi stared at the rough diagrams, a spark igniting within her. That's exactly what's needed," she breathed. "But I would need to learn about technology, software development, digital infrastructure." "You could learn," David said simply. "You're already managing a full-time job, 3 children, and a rigorous academic program. Technology would just be one more mountain to climb." In the weeks that followed, Lexi began sketching her first rudimentary business plan for a digital health platform. Between classes, work, and caring for the triplets, she found moments to research telehealth solutions, often falling asleep with her laptop still open beside her. David became a regular visitor, bringing educational games for the children and take-out dinners when he sensed Lexi was too exhausted to cook. Maria watched the developing friendship with cautious approval. "He's a good man," she told Lexi one evening. "He sees your value." On the triplets' 3rd birthday, Lexi managed to bake a small cake decorated with their favorite cartoon characters. The celebration was modest, just the 5 of them in their small apartment, but filled with genuine joy. As the children blew out their candles, Lexi made a silent promise. One day, she would offer them every opportunity that Anthony Reynolds would have provided, and more. They would have the best education, explore their talents fully, and never question their worth. While watching her children blow out the candles on their homemade cake, Lexi couldn't predict that the idea born in that community clinic would transform into a billion-dollar company, nor that the napkins with scribbles would one day be displayed in the Museum of Business Innovation. The modest birthday celebration left a warmth in Lexi's heart that lingered for days. 2 years had passed since that simple gathering, and now, as she sat in the university library surrounded by towering stacks of technology books, business manuals, and healthcare journals, Lexi's determination had only grown stronger. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, testament to late nights divided between studying for her final year of business administration and researching digital healthcare solutions. "The interface needs to be intuitive enough for elderly patients," she muttered, making notes in her worn notebook. Her finger traced a diagram of user experience flows, the page filled with annotations and questions. A gentle tap on her shoulder interrupted her concentration. David Chen stood behind her, 2 coffee cups in hand, his kind eyes crinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You've been here since 7 this morning," he said, placing 1 cup beside her textbooks. "I thought you might need reinforcements." Lexi smiled gratefully, stretching her stiff shoulders. "Programming is more challenging than I anticipated. The logic makes perfect sense, but the execution—" David pulled up a chair beside her. "The best innovations come from people who understand the problem, not from those who master the technology," he observed, examining her notes. "You know the healthcare gaps intimately. That's your advantage." Back at their apartment, now in a slightly better neighborhood thanks to Lexi's promotion at the clinic, the triplets were showcasing the extraordinary talents that had become impossible to ignore. Maria watched in amazement as 5-year-old Sophia methodically dismantled an old desktop computer Lexi had brought home from a clinic upgrade. "What are you doing, Minha querida?" Maria asked. "I want to see how it thinks," Sophia replied matter-of-factly, her small fingers deftly separating circuit boards with surprising precision. Across the room, Lucas sat cross-legged on the floor, solving a set of equations Lexi had copied from her university textbook to keep him occupied. What she'd intended as meaningless symbols to trace had become actual mathematical challenges he tackled with focused intensity. Meanwhile, Mateus sat at the small electronic keyboard David had given him for Christmas, playing a complex melody he'd heard just once during a visit to the university music department. His tiny fingers moved with natural grace, his expression serene as music filled the apartment. Maria crossed herself, a gesture she reserved for moments of awe. "They have talents that didn't come from me or you, minha filha. These are gifts." That evening, after the triplets were asleep, Lexi met with Professor James Wilson from the university's technology department, a connection David had facilitated. "Your concept has genuine potential," Wilson acknowledged, reviewing her preliminary business plan for what she now called Nexus Health. "But you'll need professional programmers to execute it. Healthcare applications require rigorous security protocols and compliance with numerous regulations." Lexi nodded, having anticipated this obstacle. "I understand. I've been exploring freelance developers who might work within my budget constraints." Later that week, Lexi made a difficult decision. After meticulous calculations, she withdrew $30,000 from the Reynolds Educational Fund, the first significant withdrawal beyond her tuition needs. "It's an investment in their future," she reassured herself as she transferred the funds. "Every penny will return to them multiplied." She used the money to hire Raj Patel, a talented programmer who had recently graduated and was willing to work for less than market rate in exchange for equity in her future company. Together they began developing a basic prototype of the Nexus Health platform. One evening, David arrived to find Lexi practicing her presentation for the university's startup incubator program. She paced nervously in front of a makeshift slideshow projected onto the living room wall. "The current healthcare system fails those who need it most," she was saying, her voice gaining confidence with each word. "Immigrants unable to explain their symptoms in English. Working parents who can't take time off for appointments. elderly patients without transportation. Nexus Health bridges these gaps through accessible telehealth technology. David watched with admiration. "You're going to convince them," he said when she finished. "Your passion is palpable, and you speak from lived experience." The day of the presentation arrived. Lexi wore her only professional outfit, a navy blue suit bought secondhand and carefully tailored by Maria. Her hands trembled slightly as she faced the panel of judges, mostly venture capitalists and successful entrepreneurs affiliated with the university. 20 million Americans lack adequate healthcare access due to language barriers alone, she began, her initial nervousness giving way to the conviction that had driven her for years. Nexus Health's translation algorithm enables real-time communication between patients and providers in 37 languages, while our scheduling system accommodates those working multiple jobs or lacking transportation. As she concluded, the room remained silent for a moment before erupting in questions, pointed, challenging, but engaged. Lexi answered each with clarity and confidence, drawing on her experiences at the community clinic and her research. 2 weeks later, she received the news. Nexus Health had won the Social Innovation Award, which included a $10,000 grant and mentorship opportunities. The celebration in their apartment was jubilant but simple. Pizza on paper plates, the triplets dancing around the living room while David and Maria toasted Lexi with sparkling cider in plastic cups. "To the future CEO of Nexus Health," David said, his eyes reflecting the pride he felt. As the evening wound down, Sophia approached the laptop where Lexi had pulled up the prototype interface. "Mama, I think I know how to make this work better," she said, pointing to the navigation menu. "People will get confused here." Lexi knelt beside her daughter, amazed as Sophia explained her intuitive redesign concept with remarkable clarity for a 5-year-old. "You might be right," she admitted, making notes of Sophia's suggestions. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Lexi and David sat on the small balcony of the apartment, a rare moment of quiet. "I care deeply for you, Lexi," David said softly. "For all of you." She looked at him, conflicting emotions crossing her face. "I don't know if I'm ready for another serious relationship," she admitted. "After what happened." David took her hand gently. "I'm not asking to replace anyone. I just want to walk alongside you and the children, at whatever pace feels right." Tears welled in Lexi's eyes as she squeezed his hand gratefully. The following morning, while the children were at kindergarten, Lexi found herself searching Anthony Reynolds online, something she hadn't done in months. Photos from his lavish wedding to Catherine Mitchell appeared on her screen, society pages documenting the union of two distinguished families. Anthony looked exactly as she remembered, handsome, polished, radiating privilege and confidence. In the bathroom, away from Maria's concerned eyes, Lexi allowed herself a moment of weakness. Tears streamed down her face as Anthony's cruel words echoed in her memory. "You're a girl from the Bronx, daughter of immigrants? Certainly not material to be someone's wife in my position." When she emerged, her eyes were dry, her resolve strengthened. She spent the afternoon finalizing her business plan for Nexus Health, calculating exactly how much she would need from the fund to transform her prototype into a viable product. "One day," she whispered to the photos of her children pinned to the corkboard above her desk, "he'll realize exactly what he threw away." While finalizing the last details of her business plan that night, Lexi didn't know that in less than 7 years she would be declining a $500 million acquisition offer, while Reynolds Enterprises would begin facing its first serious financial crises. The envelope containing her Stanford acceptance letter trembled in Lexi's hands as she sat at the kitchen table with David, a calculator and notepad between them. The prestigious MBA program had offered her a partial scholarship, substantial, but not enough to cover the full cost of attendance while supporting 3 children. "I've calculated everything," Lexi said, pushing a paper filled with meticulous figures toward David. "Tuition, housing, childcare, living expenses. Even with the scholarship, we're looking at a significant shortfall. David studied the numbers, his expression thoughtful. What about the fund? You've barely touched it except for your undergraduate tuition. Lexi bit her lip. I promised myself that money was exclusively for their education. And isn't your MBA an investment in their future? David reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Every degree you earn, every skill you master, it all benefits them in the long run. After a week of careful deliberation, Lexi made her decision. She would accept Stanford's offer and use a portion of the Reynolds Educational Fund to bridge the financial gap. The move to California would be challenging, but the opportunities in Silicon Valley for her healthcare technology concept were unmatched. I can request a transfer to Berkeley, David offered as they discussed logistics. Their mathematics department has a position opening next fall. That is, if you want me to come with you. The warmth in his eyes made Lexi's decision easy. We would all like that very much. 2 months later, their modest Honda Civic crawled along Interstate 80, loaded with essential belongings strapped to the roof. The triplets, now 5.5 years old, were squeezed in the back seat, Sophia reading a book about computers, Lucas solving puzzles in a mathematics workbook, and Mateus humming along to the classical music playing softly on the radio. "Are we going to live in a castle in California, Mama?" Sophia asked, looking up from her book. Lexi exchanged an amused glance with David. "Not exactly, sweetheart, but our new apartment will have more space than our Chicago place." Their first apartment in Palo Alto was a modest 3-bedroom unit in a graduate student housing complex. Functional but far from luxurious, especially compared to the neighboring mansions owned by tech executives and venture capitalists. "It's perfect," Lexi declared as they carried in the last box. "Everyone has a bed. There's a desk for my work and we're 15 minutes from campus." Stanford's campus humbled Lexi on her first day of orientation. Walking among the palm-lined paths, she observed her classmates, many straight from undergraduate programs, wearing designer clothes and discussing family vacation homes. The privileged background surrounding her echoed Anthony's world. "I have 10 years of life experience on them," she whispered to herself, straightening her shoulders as she entered the business school building, "and lessons they'll never learn in classrooms." The triplets thrived in their new environment. After testing revealed exceptional abilities in all 3 children, they were admitted to Oakwood Academy, a public school for gifted students in the area. On their first day, Lexi received 3 separate calls from astonished teachers. Sophia corrected our computer science instructor on coding syntax, the principal explained. Lucas solved algebra problems we usually reserve for 8th graders, and Matthias, well, our music teacher is asking if he's had professional training. His pitch recognition is extraordinary. "They're self-taught," Lexi answered simply, pride warming her voice. "They've always been curious." 6 months after their move, David invited Lexi to the community garden plot he had secured near their apartment complex. Among rows of tomatoes and herbs, he knelt on one knee, a simple sapphire ring extended toward her. "I don't have much to offer financially," he said, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "But I want to officially be part of this family, if you'll have me." Tears filled Lexi's eyes as she nodded. "We would be honored." Their wedding was held in the same community garden, a modest celebration with the triplets serving as attendants. Maria, who had initially stayed in Chicago, moved to California 2 weeks before the ceremony, her eyes glistening as she watched her daughter begin a new chapter. "He sees your worth," Maria whispered as she helped Lexi with her simple white dress. "That's all a mother wants for her child." 3 months after the wedding, they stood in a courthouse as a judge finalized the adoption proceedings. David had insisted on legally adopting the children, a gesture that moved Lexi beyond words. "By the power vested in me," the judge announced, "I hereby declare that from this day forward you are officially Sophia, Lucas, and Mateus Martins Chen." That evening, as the children celebrated with ice cream, David explained the significance of their new hyphenated surname. "Martins represents your Brazilian heritage through your mother and grandmother," he told them. "Chen connects you to my Taiwanese ancestry. Together they tell the story of who you are and where you came from." As Lexi's MBA program progressed, Nexus Health evolved from concept to developing business. Using her experience and connections from the university's innovation program, she secured an invitation to present at a regional healthcare startup showcase. Standing before an audience of potential investors, in a navy suit purchased from a consignment store but impeccably tailored, Lexi delivered her pitch with passion and precision. Nexus Health isn't just another telehealth platform, she explained, displaying her prototype interface. We're addressing the fundamental barriers that prevent vulnerable populations from accessing care: language isolation, transportation limitations, work schedule constraints, and cultural disconnections. After her presentation, several investors approached with interest. One, a partner at Horizon Ventures, was particularly direct. $250,000 for 30% is generous for an idea without customers yet, he stated, handing her his card. Think about it. That night, Lexi discussed the offer with David at their kitchen table, spreadsheets and projections scattered between them. "It's a standard early-stage valuation," David acknowledged, "but you'd be giving up significant control." Lexi shook her head. "I'm not selling just an idea. I'm offering a solution to a problem I've lived through and observed firsthand. They're undervaluing that perspective." After careful consideration, Lexi made a bold decision. Rather than accepting external investment that would dilute her ownership and potentially compromise her vision, she would use $500,000 from the Reynolds Fund to launch Nexus Health independently. "If we use half the fund and fail, there will still be something for their college education," she explained to David. "But if we succeed, the return on investment will be exponentially greater." With the funding secured, Lexi hired her first 2 employees, Jeremy Wong, a senior programmer with healthcare experience, and Dr. Alicia Morales, a public health specialist who immediately understood Nexus Health's mission. Together, they transformed the garage of the small house Lexi and David had recently rented into a makeshift office, installing whiteboards on walls, computers on simple desks, with the hand-painted Nexus Health logo prominently displayed. On the evening of the company's official launch, the family gathered in the garage-turned-office for a modest celebration. Lexi poured sparkling apple juice into paper cups, and they all raised a toast. "To Nexus Health," David proposed, "and its visionary founder. To connecting people with care," Lexi added, emotion making her voice tremble slightly. As Sophia, Lucas, and Mateus clinked their cups together, their faces illuminated with excitement and pride, Lexi felt a profound sense of purpose. This moment, this beginning, represented everything she had fought for since that devastating day in Anthony's penthouse. While they toasted the birth of Nexus Health in that small garage, no one could predict that in just 5 years the company would be valued at $500 million. Nor that Lexi's son would be correcting a crucial algorithm error that would save thousands of lives. The sound of clinking glasses echoed in the garage-turned-office as the Martins Chen family celebrated the birth of Nexus Health. 3 years had passed since that modest toast with paper cups, and the company that began as a concept sketched on napkins had grown beyond Lexi's most ambitious projections. Nexus Health now occupied the entire 10th floor of a gleaming office building in Palo Alto. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the surrounding tech campus, while the company logo, a stylized bridge connecting a stethoscope to a smartphone, greeted visitors in the reception area. 50 employees moved purposefully through the open workspace, their energy palpable as they developed and refined the platform that was revolutionizing healthcare access for marginalized communities. Lexi stood in her office, reviewing the latest user statistics on her tablet. The Nexus application now allowed patients from immigrant communities to consult with doctors remotely, featuring real-time translation in 27 languages and a sliding-scale payment system that made healthcare accessible to those previously excluded by financial barriers. The numbers from the South Bronx pilot program exceeded projections by 32%, reported Sanjay, her newly hired data analyst. Particularly impressive is the 87% medication adherence rate among non-English speakers. Lexi nodded, satisfaction warming her chest. The South Bronx, where her mother had raised her, where she had once felt the sting of limited opportunities, was now benefiting directly from the company she had built. A notification flashed on her screen. Another acquisition offer, this time from MedTech Global. The figure made her breath catch momentarily. $200 million for 60% ownership. "Tell them the same thing we told the others," she instructed her chief operating officer, Rachel. "Nexus Health isn't built to be acquired. Our mission is too important to compromise." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "That's the 5th offer we've declined this year. The board might start asking questions." "Then remind them that I retain controlling interest precisely for this reason," Lexi replied, her tone gentle but firm. "We're not just building a profitable company, we're changing lives." The afternoon brought the triplets' regular visit to the office. At 10 years old, Sophia, Lucas, and Mateus had become familiar fixtures at Nexus Health, their extraordinary abilities now impossible to dismiss as mere precocity. Sophia headed straight for the development team's area, where programmers twice her age welcomed her input. Her small fingers flew across a keyboard as she identified inefficiencies in the user interface code. "This conditional statement creates a redundant authentication check," she explained to Jeremy, the lead developer. "If we restructure it this way, the app will load 20% faster on older devices." Jeremy examined her work, eyes widening. "She's right," he told Lexi later. "Again, have you considered letting her formally contribute to our codebase?" Across the office, Lucas stood before a whiteboard covered in statistical models explaining his approach to predicting usage spikes to the data science team. "If we incorporate seasonal illness patterns by zip code, we can better allocate server resources during flu season," he explained, his voice still childishly high but his concepts sophisticated beyond his years. Meanwhile, Mateus sat in the break room, composing a jingle on a keyboard the marketing team had installed specifically for him. His musical creations had become the signature sound of Nexus Health's advertising campaigns, instantly recognizable across their target markets. An employee passing by Lexi shook his head in amazement. "Your children are 10 years old and already contributing at this level? Extraordinary." That evening, the family celebrated a significant milestone. Nexus Health had secured a contract with the largest community health network in California, expanding their reach to over 1 million underserved patients. David had prepared a special dinner, his pride in Lexi's accomplishments evident in every detail of the celebration. "To the visionary who saw what others couldn't," he toasted, raising his glass to Lexi. "And to the future of healthcare accessibility." The triplets clinked their glasses of sparkling cider, their faces glowing with admiration for their mother. In these moments, Lexi felt a contentment that once seemed impossible during those dark days after Anthony's rejection. The following Tuesday began like any other, with Lexi reviewing quarterly projections before a board meeting. David called, his voice uncharacteristically strained. "I need to see you," he said. "I've just come from Dr. Kapoor's office." 3 hours later, Lexi sat beside David in an oncologist's office, gripping his hand as words like pancreatic adenocarcinoma and advanced stage filled the sterile room. The prognosis was delivered with compassionate directness, 6 to 8 months, with treatment offering only modest extensions. "The cancer has already metastasized to the liver," Dr. Williams explained gently. "I wish I had better news." In the weeks that followed, Lexi divided herself between the hospital and the office, sleeping only a few hours each night. She refused to let either responsibility suffer, reviewing company reports beside David's hospital bed and conducting video conferences from the oncology ward waiting room. The triplets displayed a maturity that both impressed and broke Lexi's heart. They organized household chores without being asked, prepared simple meals when she came home exhausted, and maintained perfect grades despite the emotional turmoil. Each afternoon, they would complete their homework in David's hospital room, quietly sharing their day with the man who had chosen to be their father. "Don't let my illness interrupt what you've built," David insisted during a rare moment when they were alone, the children having gone to the cafeteria. "Nexus needs you, our family needs you, but the world needs what you've created." As David's condition deteriorated, Lexi received unexpected news. Nexus Health had won the National Innovation in Healthcare Award, a prestigious recognition that would put the company in the national spotlight for the first time. "You should attend the ceremony," David insisted from his hospital bed, now thinner and paler but his eyes still bright with pride. This recognition could help expand Nexus to communities that desperately need it. The Wall Street Journal requested an interview following the award announcement. Seated in a conference room at their offices, Lexi spoke candidly about her journey. "I began as a single mother of newborn triplets," she told the reporter. "If I could manage that while working multiple jobs and pursuing an education, I knew I could build a company that would make healthcare more accessible for others facing seemingly insurmountable obstacles." David smiled weakly when she showed him the published article from his hospital bed. A small section mentioned her background as a single mother who had built a healthcare technology company from scratch while raising triplets. "You are extraordinary, Lexi," he whispered, squeezing her hand with what strength remained in his. "Never forget that." 2 weeks later, David Chen passed away peacefully, surrounded by Lexi and the children he had loved as his own. His last words to her had been a promise extracted. "Don't let the past define your future. You deserve every happiness." The funeral was simple but dignified, attended by colleagues from Berkeley, the entire Nexus Health staff, and the triplets' teachers. In lieu of traditional music, Mateus performed an original composition on the violin, the haunting melody expressing the grief words couldn't capture. That night, long after the children had fallen into exhausted sleep, Lexi sat alone in her office at home. On her desk lay the Wall Street Journal article, now tear-stained as she reread the brief mention of her journey as a single mother. The pain of loss mingled with a renewed determination to fulfill David's final wish, to continue building the company that was changing thousands of lives. That lonely night in the office, as tears fell onto the newspaper page, Lexi didn't know that her brief mention of being a single mother of triplets would reach New York, where Anthony Reynolds, now an ambitious councilman, would recognize the vaguely familiar story of a rising entrepreneur named Alexia Martins Chen. The Wall Street Journal article featuring Lexi's story remained on Anthony Reynolds' desk in New York, coffee stains marking the edges where he had repeatedly held it during moments of contemplation. 2 years had passed since David's death, and the pain had transformed into a driving force that propelled Nexus Health to unprecedented heights. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nexus Health's executive conference room, illuminating the faces of 20 diverse leaders seated around a polished mahogany table. Lexi, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that conveyed both authority and understated elegance, stood at the head of the table reviewing quarterly projections. "Our user base has crossed the 4 million threshold," she announced, gesturing toward the large display screen behind her. "Operations have successfully expanded to 12 countries, and our team now includes 500 employees across 3 continents." Murmurs of approval rippled through the room as senior executives exchanged satisfied glances. What had begun in a California garage had blossomed into a healthcare technology powerhouse, one whose mission remained firmly anchored in accessibility and equity. "The translation algorithm update has increased accuracy by 17%, reported Miguel, the chief technology officer. "However, we're still seeing occasional errors in medical terminology for the Mandarin and Arabic versions." Before Lexi could respond, her phone vibrated with a message from Jeremy, the lead developer. Sophia found critical error in translation matrix. Implementing her fix now, estimated 23% improvement. A smile touched Lexi's lips. At 12 years old, her daughter had once again demonstrated an intuitive understanding of code that surpassed many seasoned professionals. After dismissing the meeting, Lexi made her way to the development department where Sophia sat beside Jeremy, her fingers flying across a keyboard. The conditional logic was inverted for idiomatic medical phrases, Sophia explained without looking up, her dark curls falling across her face. Simple fix, but it would have caused potentially dangerous mistranslations in emergency situations. She spotted it immediately, Jeremy added, shaking his head in amazement. Something our entire team missed during 3 rounds of quality assurance. Across the campus, in the mathematics building of Stanford University, Lucas stood before a room of graduate students and professors, presenting his paper on predictive algorithms for patient load distribution. At 12, he was easily the youngest person to have published in the prestigious Journal of Computational Mathematics, his article on numerical methods having caught the attention of leading scholars in the field. By applying this modified Bayesian approach, he explained, indicating complex equations on the projection screen, healthcare systems can anticipate usage patterns with 94% accuracy, allowing for optimal resource allocation during crisis periods. Meanwhile, in an auditorium downtown, Mateus drew his bow across violin strings with practiced precision, performing as the featured soloist with the Bay Area Youth Symphony. His rendition of Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto brought the audience to their feet, many unaware that the poised young performer had composed 3 original pieces that would debut the following season. That evening, as Lexi left her office, her assistant handed her an envelope bearing the logo of Fortune magazine. "Congratulations," the note inside read. "You've been selected for our 40 under 40 list, recognizing the most influential business leaders under 40 years of age. The cover photo shoot is scheduled for next Tuesday." At home, over a dinner of takeout Chinese food, a luxury Lexi still savored after years of careful budgeting, she shared the news with her children. "Does this mean more people will know about Nexus?" Lucas asked pragmatically. "It means more investors will be interested," Lexi explained. "And more importantly, more healthcare systems might adopt our platform." Later that night, while the triplets completed homework assignments far beyond their grade level, Lexi found herself scrolling through financial news. A small headline caught her attention. "Reynolds Enterprises faces downturn after failed Manhattan development." The article detailed how Anthony Reynolds, now a state senator for New York, had guided the company his father built into a series of questionable investments. Property values had plummeted in their flagship development, and rumors of liquidity problems circulated among industry insiders. Lexi felt no satisfaction at this news, only a curious detachment, as if reading about a stranger rather than the man who had once shattered her world. The following week brought a turning point for Nexus Health. Jordan Wallace, managing partner at Elevation Capital, requested a meeting to discuss potential investment. $100 million for 20%, he stated after preliminary pleasantries, sliding a term sheet across Lexi's desk. "This values Nexus at $500 million, Mrs. Martins-Chen." Lexi studied the document, her expression revealing nothing of the emotions surging through her. $500 million. A valuation that transformed the million-dollar check that was meant to make her disappear into a footnote in her company's journey. "I maintain majority control," she stated. Not a question, but a condition. "We anticipated that requirement," Jordan replied. "The term sheet includes provisions ensuring you retain decision-making authority regarding the company's mission of serving low-income communities." After 2 weeks of negotiations with Elevation Capital's legal team, Lexi signed the deal. The investment would fuel Nexus Health's expansion into new markets, develop advanced features, and establish a research division focused on healthcare access innovations. The Fortune photo shoot took place in Nexus Health's headquarters. Lexi chose a deep navy blazer that complemented her eyes, her posture radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every step of her success. The photographer directed her to look directly into the camera, capturing the determination that had become her hallmark. "Perfect," he said after several clicks. "There's something in your expression that tells a story beyond the typical executive portrait." When the magazine hit newsstands, Lexi purchased several copies. The cover featured her against a simple blue background, the headline reading, "Alexia Martins Chen, Revolutionizing Healthcare Access Through Technology." Inside, a 6-page spread detailed her journey from single mother to healthcare technology innovator. That evening, as she flipped through business magazines in her home office, Lexi paused at a small article mentioning difficulties at Reynolds Enterprises and Anthony's political aspirations. The photo showed him at a fundraising gala, Catherine Mitchell Reynolds at his side, both wearing fixed smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The contrast between their reality and the life she had built prompted a significant decision. After consulting with her executive team and the children, Lexi announced that Nexus Health would relocate its headquarters to Chicago, establishing a corporate presence in the heart of the Midwest healthcare corridor. "Chicago offers strategic advantages," she explained to the triplets over dinner. "Better opportunities for you academically and for the company, proximity to major medical research institutions." 3 months later, Lexi stood in the lobby of Nexus Health's new headquarters, a sleek skyscraper on Michigan Avenue with the company name illuminated in blue letters visible across the Chicago skyline. The space reflected both the company's success and its values, modern yet welcoming, impressive without being ostentatious. Their new home, a spacious penthouse with panoramic views of Lake Michigan, finally matched the level of comfort Lexi had worked years to provide. The triplets explored their expansive bedrooms with a mixture of excitement and amazement. "All this seems surreal after where we started," Mateus observed quietly, gazing out at the glittering city lights. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Lexi stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her bedroom, holding the framed fortune cover in her hands. For the first time since founding Nexus, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her accomplishment, not just professional success, but the creation of a life rich with purpose and love. Contemplating the lights of the city that was now her domain, Lexi didn't imagine that in less than 2 years she would be invited as the keynote speaker at the annual Health Innovation Conference in New York, where Anthony Reynolds would be present as a member of the Senate Health Committee. The lights of Chicago reflected on Lake Michigan as Lexi stood at her penthouse window, the Fortune magazine cover still in her hands. 2 years had passed since that moment of quiet celebration, and Nexus Health Technologies had transformed from a successful startup into a corporate powerhouse poised to enter the S&P 500. Morning sunlight streamed through the wall-to-wall windows of Lexi's corner office on the top floor of Nexus Tower. The Chicago skyline provided a dramatic backdrop as she reviewed the final slides for her keynote address at the annual Health Innovation Conference in New York. "The valuation report just came in, Mrs. Martins Chen," announced Jacob, her chief financial officer, entering with a tablet in hand. $4.2 billion. The S&P 500 inclusion is confirmed for next week. Lexi nodded, allowing herself a brief smile. "And the Department of Health contract?" They called again about the rural expansion platform. They're eager to finalize before the fiscal year ends. "Tell them I'll be personally attending the negotiations in Washington next Thursday," Lexi replied, adjusting her gold-rimmed glasses. At 39, she had grown into her power with a refined elegance that intimidated boardroom executives. The years had transformed her natural beauty, adding a sophisticated confidence that came from overcoming impossible odds. Her phone chimed with a message from Sophia. "Arrived at the hotel. We're in the lobby." Lexi smiled and excused herself from her team. She had initially resisted the triplets' insistence on accompanying her to New York. The thought of returning to the city where Anthony had discarded her still triggered an undercurrent of anxiety, especially knowing he would be attending the conference as a member of the Senate Health Committee. As she turned toward the lobby to find her children, Lexi froze. Across the marble expanse of the Plaza Hotel's grand entrance, surrounded by aides and security personnel, stood Anthony Reynolds. 15 years had left visible marks on the senator. His once dark brown hair now displayed distinguished silver at the temples, and fine lines etched the corners of his eyes and mouth. Still, he maintained the imposing posture and charismatic smile that had won over voters and investors for decades. Lexi drew a deep breath, trying to control the emotional whirlwind his unexpected presence triggered. She had mentally prepared to see him only during their panel discussion the following day, protected by professional formality and public setting. "Mom!" Sophia's voice cut through the moment. The three teenagers approached, walking confidently through the luxurious lobby, drawing admiring glances from those they passed. Tall for their age, elegant and carrying themselves with natural poise, the Martins-Chen triplets embodied privileged and talented youth. At the exact moment Lexi embraced her children, she noticed Anthony registering her presence. She watched recognition dawn on his face, followed by unmistakable shock when his gaze shifted to the teenagers beside her. The resemblance was impossible to miss. All three young people shared the distinctive green-blue eyes that had been a Reynolds family trademark for generations. Anthony's expression transformed from professional neutrality to stunned disbelief in seconds. "Sophia, Lucas, Mateus," Lexi said with forced calm. "Let's head up to our suite. I need to prepare for tomorrow's keynote." As she guided her children toward the elevators, Lexi felt Anthony's stare burning into her back. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the lobby, his filled with questions and incredulity, hers cold and impenetrable. 2 hours later, the grand ballroom of the plaza was filled to capacity for the opening keynote. As CEO of the industry's most innovative company, Lexi had been chosen to launch the prestigious event. Her children waited proudly in the front row. Several seats away, Anthony Reynolds sat rigidly, his gaze never leaving Lexi or the triplets. "It is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker," announced the Master of Ceremonies, "a woman who revolutionized global healthcare access, transforming an initial investment of just $1 million into a technological empire valued at over $4 billion. Please welcome Alexia Martins-Chen, founder and CEO of Nexus Health Technologies." Applause echoed through the hall as Lexi ascended the stage with the confidence of someone who had earned her place through merit and determination. Her impeccably tailored navy blue dress and Louboutin heels were silent reminders of how far she had come from the days of working 3 jobs to support her babies. "Innovation is born from necessity," she began, her clear voice capturing everyone's attention. 15 years ago, I was a single mother of newborn triplets, without adequate access to health care, depending on community clinics with long waiting lines. It was in those waiting rooms, holding 3 babies, that I envisioned what would become Nexus. As she spoke about the company's journey, Lexi observed Anthony's expression. With each achievement she mentioned, each obstacle overcome, each million added to Nexus's valuation, he seemed to shrink further into his chair. "Our latest innovation, which I'm pleased to announce today, is an artificial intelligence diagnostic platform that can identify 94% of rare diseases in early stages, saving thousands of lives annually." She paused, "And I'm proud to reveal that the base algorithm was co-developed by my daughter Sophia, who at 14 already demonstrates the extraordinary talent that will take her far beyond what I ever dreamed." Anthony's eyes darted to Sophia, who smiled shyly while receiving applause. After the presentation, during the reception, their meeting became inevitable. Anthony, visibly nervous, approached the group where Lexi was conversing with pharmaceutical executives. "Alexia," he said, using her formal name, "impressive presentation. I wanted to congratulate you personally." Lexi turned slowly, her face a mask of professional courtesy. "Senator Reynolds, thank you for your words." An uncomfortable silence hung between them until Anthony continued. "Would it be possible for us to speak privately for a few minutes?" Before she could respond, the triplets approached. "Mom," said Lucas, "Dr. Tanaka wants to introduce us to the director of the UN's Young Scientists program." Anthony visibly paled, seeing the three teenagers up close. The resemblance was undeniable, not just the eyes but certain facial expressions. Lucas's nose shape, Mateus's smile, everything proclaimed their parentage. "Of course, sweetheart," Lexi responded to her children, then turned to Anthony. "Senator, these are my children, Sophia, Lucas, and Mateus Martins Chen. Children, this is Senator Reynolds, member of the Senate Health Committee." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Senator," Sophia said politely, extending her hand. "I read your article on medical research funding reform. I have some thoughts about the gaps in financing for rare diseases, if you're interested." Anthony shook her hand automatically, clearly stunned by the young woman's confidence and articulation. Yes, certainly. It would be interesting to hear your perspective." "You'll be participating in the same panel tomorrow, correct?" asked Lucas, always attentive to details. "It will be fascinating to see how your visions of the future of digital health align or diverge." 15 years, murmured Anthony, looking directly at Lexi. "They're 15 years old." 14 years and 8 months, to be precise, Lexi corrected, her tone deliberately casual, before turning to her children. "Why don't you go speak with Dr. Tanaka? I'll join you in a moment." When the teenagers moved away, Anthony appeared like a man who had received a punch to the stomach. "They're mine, aren't they?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Biologically speaking, yes," Lexi replied coldly. "Legally, and in every other aspect that matters, they are David Chen's and mine." "Why did you never tell me? I had the right to know." Lexi smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Right? Interesting choice of words, Senator. You forfeited any rights when you handed me a $1 million check and demanded I solve the problem. Remember that?" While the camera flashes captured the moment Anthony approached the triplets after the panel, no one could predict that the next morning every major media outlet would feature headlines about the secret heirs of Senator Reynolds, a scandal that would permanently alter the course of multiple lives. As the flashbulbs from dozens of smartphones captured Anthony approaching the triplets, a current of whispers rippled through the ballroom. Lexi watched as attendees discreetly angled their devices, documenting the moment when the distinguished Senator Reynolds awkwardly introduced himself to 3 teenagers who unmistakably shared his distinctive eyes. By morning, those images would become the centerpiece of a media firestorm that neither of them had anticipated. Dawn broke over Manhattan with headlines that turned private pain into public spectacle. Lexi's phone began buzzing incessantly at 5:30 in the morning, notifications flooding the screen with increasing urgency. Revelation bombshell, Senator Reynolds' secret heirs. Tech billionaire and senator share more than healthcare interests. Mystery solved. The origin of the Martins Chen prodigies. Lexi sat in her presidential suite, wrapped in a hotel bathrobe, watching the coverage with calculated calmness. She hadn't planned this exposure but recognized its inevitability. In a digital age where facial recognition algorithms could match strangers on opposite sides of the globe, the resemblance between Anthony and the triplets had been a ticking time bomb from the moment they entered the same room. A soft knock on the door announced the arrival of the teenagers. They entered with uncharacteristic hesitation, their expressions bearing the weight of questions too long unasked. "So it's true," Sophia said, the first to break the silence. "Senator Reynolds is our biological father." It wasn't a question but a conclusion drawn from evidence now impossible to ignore. Lexi nodded slowly, her throat suddenly dry. "Why did you never tell us?" Lucas asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and hurt that pierced Lexi's heart more effectively than Anthony's accusations ever could. "I've sat for 15 years countless times wondering how and when to tell you," Lexi replied, motioning for them to sit on the suite's plush sofa. When you were small, you were too young to understand. Later, when David came into our lives and loved you as his own, the truth seemed more complex. After his death, I didn't want to tarnish your memories of him as your father. But he knew, Mateus asked quietly, his voice barely audible above the muted television broadcasting yet another analysis of the Reynolds revelation. Yes, David knew everything from the beginning. It was one of the first things I told him when we started getting to know each other. Lexi smiled at the memory. He said any man who couldn't see the treasure that you three were didn't deserve to be called a father. Sophia, always practical, went straight to the heart of the matter. And now, what happens with all this media exposure? Lexi sighed, brushing back a strand of hair that had escaped her usually perfect coiffure. That partially depends on you. Legally, you are Martin's Chen. David adopted you officially, and Senator Reynolds signed documents relinquishing any parental rights before you were even born. But emotionally, that's something each of you needs to process in your own way. Another knock interrupted their conversation. Jacob, her CFO, stood at the door with an expression of concern etched on his features. I apologize for the interruption, Alexia, but Senator Reynolds is insisting on seeing you. He's been in the lobby for an hour, refusing to leave until he speaks with you. Lexi exchanged glances with her children. What would you prefer? I can send him away. After a moment of silence, Lucas spoke. I think we all deserve to hear what he has to say. 20 minutes later, Anthony Reynolds entered the presidential suite. He appeared to have aged a decade overnight. His impeccable suit and confident posture had been replaced by rumpled clothing and reddened eyes that suggested a sleepless night. Thank you for agreeing to see me, he began, visibly nervous as he observed the three teenagers seated beside Lexi. I know nothing I say can justify my past actions, but I'd like to try to explain. Explain what exactly? Sophia asked directly. Why you abandoned our mother when she was pregnant? Why you paid her to disappear? Or why you never, in 15 years, tried to find out if we were alive? Anthony flinched at the young woman's frankness. All of it. I was a different man then, ambitious, selfish, concerned only with my political career and my family company's legacy. I thought a scandal would destroy everything my family had built for generations. And that justified treating our mother as disposable? Lucas's voice was controlled, but his eyes, identical to Anthony's, burned with indignation. No, it didn't, admitted Anthony, sitting heavily in an armchair. Nothing justifies it. It was the biggest mistake of my life, and I've spent the last 15 years building an empty existence on that foundation of cowardice. He turned to Lexi. My marriage to Catherine is a political facade. We have no children. She never wanted them, and well, after you disappeared, something inside me died. Reynolds Enterprises is on the verge of bankruptcy because I lost my passion for business. My presidential candidacy is a desperate attempt to prove something to my deceased father. And what do you want from us now? Asked Lexi, her voice cold. Absolution? Forgiveness? An instant family to fill the void you created yourself? Anthony shook his head. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that, despite my unforgivable mistakes, I feel immense pride in what I see before me. 3 extraordinary young people and a remarkable woman who accomplished what I never could, building something meaningful and lasting. Mateus, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Our father, our real father, was named David Chen. He taught us mathematics and music. He read to us every night. He held our hands during every doctor's appointment. He cried at our school performances. You may share our DNA, Senator Reynolds, but that doesn't make you our father. The silence that followed was deafening. Anthony nodded slowly, accepting the painful truth in the young man's words. You're absolutely right, he finally said. A father is someone who is present, who loves unconditionally. I wasn't that. He hesitated, then continued. I'm not asking to replace David's memory. I'd just like to get to know you, if you ever allow it. As a family friend, perhaps, or just as someone who deeply admires you. Sophia exchanged glances with her brothers before responding, We need time. This is too much to process all at once. Anthony stood, understanding that the conversation had reached its conclusion. Of course. I completely respect that. He withdrew a card from his pocket. This is my personal contact information. If you ever want to talk about anything, I'll be available. As he headed toward the door, Lexi accompanied him. In the hallway, away from the triplets' hearing, Anthony turned to her. Lexi, He seemed to search for words. You've built something extraordinary, both with Nexus and with our children. I was completely wrong about you, about everything. Yes, you were, she replied simply. The federal contract you secured, it was Reynolds Enterprises' last hope. Without it, we'll probably have to sell the company within months. Lexi observed the man before her, no longer the powerful executive who had humiliated her, but an individual broken by the consequences of his own choices. You know what the most important lesson I learned was, Anthony? Value doesn't come from family names, bank accounts, or political titles. It comes from the ability to face adversity and transform it into strength. Your children learned that by watching my struggle, not your privilege. Later that day, on the Grand Ballroom stage, Lexi and Anthony participated in the panel on the future of digital health. The tension between them was palpable, but both maintained professional composure. When questioned about the extraordinary coincidence of their personal lives being connected, Lexi responded with dignity, There are no coincidences, only consequences of our choices. My choices brought me here, as the leader of a company that's changing lives, and as the mother of 3 extraordinary young people. Some people bet on the status quo and established power. I bet on hard work and resilience. The results speak for themselves. The audience erupted in applause. In the front row, the triplets watched their mother with unquestionable admiration. When the camera flashes captured the moment Anthony approached the triplets after the panel, no one could predict that the next morning every major media outlet would feature headlines about the secret heirs of Senator Reynolds, a scandal that would permanently alter the course of multiple lives. The next morning, Anthony Reynolds sat frozen in his hotel suite, staring at the television screen where his face appeared alongside Lexi's and the triplets. Every major news network had splashed their story across the headlines, analyzing facial similarities, timelines, and the implications for his political career. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. His campaign manager, party leaders, Catherine's lawyer, and endless reporters demanding statements. Revealed, the secret heirs of Senator Reynolds, screamed the CNN Chiron as photos of the teenagers juxtaposed with Anthony's college yearbook picture highlighted their unmistakable resemblance. Sources close to the senator neither confirm nor deny paternity, the commentator intoned, but the striking similarity between Reynolds and the 3 teenagers, particularly their distinctive eyes, a known Reynolds family trait, has sparked widespread speculation. Anthony turned off the television with shaking hands. The carefully constructed narrative of his life was unraveling thread by thread. He reached for his phone and, ignoring the dozens of missed calls, texted a simple message to Lexi. May I speak with you and the children today? On your terms. In the presidential suite across the hotel, Lexi was handling the situation with the calm efficiency that had become her trademark. She had already briefed Nexus Health's public relations team, consulted with her attorney, and most importantly, sat with her children to process their feelings about the public exposure. What would you prefer? She asked them after Anthony's message arrived. We can decline, postpone, or meet with him. This is your decision. The triplets exchanged glances. their silent communication reflecting years of shared experience. "I have questions I want answered," Sophia said firmly. "Not for his sake, but for mine." Lucas nodded. "I'd like to understand his reasoning process, flawed as it was." "I want to know if he regrets it," Mateus added quietly. "Really regrets it, or just regrets being exposed." 2 hours later, Anthony entered their suite again, this time in a fresh suit that couldn't disguise his haunted expression. Security personnel had needed to help him navigate through the reporters camped in the hotel lobby. "Thank you," he said simply, taking the seat Lexi indicated. Sophia, direct as always, began without preamble. "Did you ever think about us? Even once in 15 years?" Anthony's shoulders sagged. "The truth is, I tried not to. I convinced myself that you—" He glanced at Lexi. "Had probably terminated the pregnancy. It was easier than facing what I'd done." "But the money," Lucas interjected. "You must have wondered what happened to such a large sum." "I assumed it was spent," Anthony admitted. "I never imagined it would become the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar company. I never imagined—" His voice faltered as he gestured toward the 3 extraordinary young people before him. "Would you have wanted us if we weren't exceptional?" Mateus asked, his perceptiveness cutting to the heart of the matter. "If we were just average children, would you be sitting here now?" Anthony's silence provided the answer more honestly than words could have. Lexi, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "Your press team has been releasing statements all morning suggesting this is a private family matter. Are we suddenly your family now that it's convenient?" "I've been living a lie for 15 years, Anthony said, his voice breaking. "My marriage, my career, everything built on the foundation of that terrible mistake. Seeing you all yesterday, it was like waking from a 15-year sleepwalk." The conversation continued for hours, painful truths exchanged without predication. The teenagers asked penetrating questions that left Anthony alternately defensive and ashamed. No one offered forgiveness, but a certain clarity emerged, a mutual understanding of how one moment of profound selfishness had created ripples that transformed multiple lives. As the day progressed, Anthony's phone continued to vibrate with increasingly urgent messages. Finally, he glanced at it and paled. "Catherine is holding a press conference in 30 minutes, he said. "Without me." They watched together on the suite's television as Catherine Mitchell Reynolds, immaculately groomed and coldly composed, announced her filing for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and previously undisclosed circumstances. 6 months later, the business pages announced the official sale of Reynolds Enterprises to a foreign investment group. Anthony had resigned from the Senate weeks earlier, citing personal reasons and a desire to reconnect with family values. Catherine had finalized their divorce the same week, taking with her a substantial settlement that further depleted Anthony's diminished fortune. On a quiet Sunday afternoon in Chicago, the doorbell of the Martins Chen residence chimed. Lexi opened the door to find Anthony standing alone, holding a small package. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said. "I brought something for the kids." Inside the spacious living room, the triplets waited. After months of family therapy and difficult conversations, they had decided to give a limited relationship with their biological father a chance. Anthony opened the package, revealing 3 small velvet boxes. These are watches that have been passed down through generations in the Reynolds family. Traditionally, they're given to children when they turn 16. I know you'll be turning 15 next week, but I wanted you to have them, regardless of whether you ever use the Reynolds name. Sophia, Lucas, and Mateus accepted the boxes with contemplative expressions. "Thank you," Lucas finally said, "not for the watch, but for respecting our space and time." Anthony nodded, visibly moved. "It's the least I can do." While the teenagers examined the watches, Anthony turned to Lexi. "I hear Nexus is expanding into the Asian market?" Yes, she confirmed. We just opened an office in Singapore. What you've built is impressive, he said with genuine admiration. Of all the people I've known in my life, you're the only one who truly fulfilled your complete potential. Lexi smiled, not with triumph or arrogance, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had found her place in the world. The difference between us, Anthony, is that you always measured value by what people possessed. I learned to measure it by what they overcome. Watching her children cautiously interacting with the man who shared their DNA, Lexi felt a peace she had sought for 15 years. It wasn't about revenge or poetic justice. It was about broken cycles and new beginnings. The abandonment that should have destroyed her became the foundation of an extraordinary life. The rejection that should have diminished her transformed into the strength that built an empire. And the children who should have been her burden became her greatest achievement and joy. The true victory wasn't in the billions accumulated or the empire built, but in the woman she had become, whole, powerful, and finally, free. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.